We turn next to the archival traces of how elections have been fought over many decades in Ireland, as reflected in the RTE Sound Archive.
And the votes were cast as follows.
These are the awesome words which the returning officers across the constituencies have uttered before they announce the detailed results of each count, and thus has it been for close on a century now in Irish elections. Last week we heard a bite from W.T. Cosgrave, first leader of an independent Irish government, as he was then President of the Executive Council of the Irish Free State. This was pre-television, of course, by many decades, and pre-radio. Insofar as radio declined to cover general elections, the official line was that coverage of the campaign might sway voters one way or the other. Now coverage is about little else, with airtime being allocated proportionately and never to the satisfaction of all the parties, of course.
The rights and liberties secured by the treaty must be preserved. The fullest possible advantage must be taken of our membership of the British Commonwealth of Nations and of our proximity to the British market. The government party is the one party in this country which can secure for the people political and economic salvation.
This was still the age of town square public meetings with bonfires blazing and torchlit processions to welcome party leaders to provincial towns.
The meetings were sometimes late, there were bonfires, there was great enthusiasm, but in any case, the contest has taught us to consider all the points that were at issue in the election, and I think that people generally will be satisfied with the result.
W.T. Cosgrave could not have been happy with the result, although historians have often argued that it was his finest hour, as he ceded power to his arch-rival Eamon de Valera. Within 9 years, those defeated in a civil war had come to power through the ballot box.
The programme of Fianna Fáil has now been definitely adopted as the national policy of the Irish people. That programme aims at restoring the unity of Ireland and securing its independence, at placing as many families as possible upon the land, at building up our industries so that the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the houses we live in, the articles in common daily use in the lives of our people may all, as far as is reasonably possible, be produced by Irish labour from Irish materials.
Fianna Fáil got into office last year.
More newsreel. W.T. Cosgrave in the 1933 general election.
By promises which they must themselves know were incapable of fulfilment. Now after 10 months they have suddenly sprung a general election to the people, pretending that they have performed all that they undertook. If in fact that were true, or if even 100th part of it were true, there need be no election at all, because no good citizen could oppose a government that had done so much in the short space of time as 10 months, as Fianna Fáil has been.
In fact, Fianna Fáil had embedded themselves as a single-party government which would remain in power for 16 years. Not content with his margin of victory in 1932, de Valera won more decisively in a snap election in 1933. And again, not content with the margin he won in 1937, de Valera consolidated his power with another contest in 1938. And he repeated this double again in 1943 and 1944.
Clonard Poblachta is the first real attempt that has been made since the Civil War to raise national affairs out of the rut of party politics and betterment.
This is from the 1948 general election. Clonard Poblachta leader Sean MacBride.
This is Clonard Poblachta calling. Noel Hartnett will now speak. Electors, at last you have an opportunity of expressing your opinion of the mismanagement of the Fianna Fáil regime.
1948 was an especially bitter campaign, and in the RTE Sound Archive is this example of the pitch of the Clonard Poblachta attack on Fianna Fáil.
The government, which has now been in office for 15 years, longer than any other government in Europe, has grown completely indifferent to the well-being and the future security of our people.
There is no indication of whether these contributions were ever broadcast, but almost certainly not. They would probably have been recorded for use at smaller public meetings where the star performers of Clonlapublic could not be present, but where their message could be played on a gramophone.
What are the achievements of Fianna Fáil in the last 5 years? They have built giant airports with giant runways, but the boys and girls, the cream of our population, still trek to the shabby old mailboats. The land is being stripped of its agricultural workers. The cost of living is daily climbing. The people are gazing on commodities in shop windows which they can no longer afford to buy.
When the result came in, De Valera expected to resume power as a minority government. Fianna Fáil was again the biggest party. But to avoid a snap election, perhaps in 1949, that had happened 3 times before, a motley crew of other parties put De Valera and Fianna Fáil out and elected John A. Costello of Fine Gael as Taoiseach in the inter-party government of 1948 to 1951.
People of Dublin.
And this is Eamon De Valera in the 1954 general election, a mass rally at the conclusion of that campaign.
We here in this campaign have tried to get for the people what, as Oscar Traynor has pointed out, is their right. The right to have policies before them so that they may be able to choose which of the policies they believe right in the interest of the country. That is their fundamental right at election time. If they don't get that chance at election times, they'll never get the chance, because in the interval, being a representative democracy, the Legislative Assembly, the Dáil Éireann, represents the nation and can take decisions in the nation's name. The only time that the people of the country have an opportunity, really, of deciding upon policy is at election time. And I've been chasing, as other members of our government and as members of Fianna Fáil and candidates have been, we've been chasing our opponents to try to get them to stand their ground somewhere.
De Valera lost that election. From 1954 to 1957, John A. Costello led another inter-party government.
Fill her up.
Have you got coupons?
Rationed? Do you mean to stand there and tell me petrol's rationed?
From the 1957 election, the then Labour leader, Minister for Industry and Commerce, William Norton.
As regards the future, the position is that unless there is some unforeseen and unexpected deterioration in the supply position, it should be possible to maintain the rations at their present level for this month and for March.
It was a remarkable election in several ways.
This is R.J. Dowling, then parliamentary correspondent of Radio Éireann, on the 1957 general election.
First of all, although nearly a third of the electors did not vote, the result gave us the strongest single-party government ever elected in this state. The Fianna Fáil party captured 78 of the 146 seats, 13 more than they previously had. It was remarkable, too, for the atmosphere of caution in which the campaign was conducted. It was an election of no promises. None of the leaders offered the public any pledge in return for support. And the voting record of the public confirms that in all the world, this is probably the stablest country, politically, of the lot.
The 1960s then was another era.
I believe that the real testing time for this country, the test of our will and determination to build up its economy, is now at hand.
Sean Lemass, who became Fianna Fáil leader in 1959 when Eamon De Valera became president, and Lemass then had 2 transforming terms as Taoiseach.
In a special sense, it is a testing time of our industrial leadership, a test of its capacity and its intention to grasp the future with both hands. If we have the wisdom to plan correctly, if we have the unity that will sink sectional aims in the national purpose, and the enthusiasm for growth and change, which is a sine qua non of progress anywhere, we cannot but succeed.
That was in May.
John Ross on Lemass's first election, October 1961.
After the general election of October, Mr. Lemass was still Taoiseach. The election had brought little actual change in the political situation beyond a reshuffle of seats and the introduction of 35 new faces in the Dáil. The government party, Fianna Fáil, were unable to get in the final spurt which would have brought them a record. They got 70 out of 144 seats. 2 more would have meant an overall majority in 2 successive elections, something that has never been accomplished.
Such was Lemass's impact on Irish politics and Irish history that it's forgotten how short a period he spent as Taoiseach, just 2 terms, and that he never won an overall majority. His successor, Jack Lynch, third leader of Fianna Fáil, did win the 1969 election, lost to a Fine Gael Labour coalition from 1973 to 1977, and then won a landslide in 1977.
Our task will be to make it clear to the people the choice that lies before them. Whether they want to continue with the talk, the smokescreens, the propaganda, and the running away from problems which have characterised this coalition government for the last 4 years, or whether they want a real government with real policies, real leadership, real conviction, and real commitment to Ireland and to the Irish people.
And the outgoing Taoiseach in 1977 was the Fine Gael leader, Liam Cosgrave.
No doubt many of you are familiar with an expression in some parts of the country where an outsider is described as a blow-in. Some of these are blow-ins. Now, as far as we're concerned, they can blow out or blow up. While the results of all the counts are not yet available, the indications are that when the new Dáil meets on the 5th of July next, there will be a change of government. I shall facilitate the smooth transfer of administration to my successor in accordance with the decision of the people.
A combination of arrogance and complacency and blaming the rest of the world on our ills. I think people like the government to face up to their own problems rather than to blame everybody else.
Jack Lynch won an overwhelming victory in 1977, and in 1979 those marginal extra seats made the difference when Charles Haughey thwarted Lynch's ambition to have George Colley be the next leader. Instead, Lynch was succeeded in December 1979 by Charles Haughey.
Charlie's song will sing as one.
Do you accept that this election is to an extent, perhaps to a substantial extent, about the people's verdict on you, the Irish people's verdict on you?
Very much so, yes, I do. And that's what I am campaigning about mainly. I'm going directly to the people on this occasion, meeting as many of them as I can personally in the towns and villages, at the crossroads, in the streets, asking them for a mandate, for their direct mandate to enable me in the next 5 years to go ahead and make a major impact on the life of this nation of ours.
Charlie's song will sing as one. Charlie's song will sing along. With Charlie's song will march along. We'll rise and follow Charlie.
Lose your vote the whole way down. And that whenever there are a couple of 3 or 4 places there are at the bottom, reserve them for the Fianna Fáil candidates.
And Fine Gael had a new leader, Gareth Fitzgerald.
And put them in the order of your choice, because some may be worse than others. But vote the whole way down. Vote the Fine Gael ticket 1, 2, 3 solidly. Don't let a vote drift away till you've voted for the 3 Fine Gael candidates.
And there was a campaign song for Fine Gael.
Fine Gael, Fine Gael. Future we hail, a bright new future we hail, led by Gareth the man you know. You won't be taking a chance, you won't be taking a chance. The world is changing so fast, so fast, so fast. No time to look to the past, no time to look to the past. So it's forward and on we go, led by the people who know. Fine Gael, Fine Gael.
Because I have, over 20 years, in the work I've been doing in different areas of public life, outside politics as well as inside politics, in a sense preparing for this. And I would like to put that preparation to good use for the country's sake, if the country gives me their confidence, as I hope they will.
And the rest, as they say, is history. The 1981 election, the 1982, both the February and November elections, and 1987. They were all Haughey versus Fitzgerald elections. Haughey was faulted for never winning an overall majority. although the share of the vote he won would now be considered beyond reach. It was always early 40s and never below 40%. And he was voted for breaking the old Fianna Fáil core value of no coalition in 1989. In fact, Fianna Fáil has never governed since, except in a coalition. That was true of Fáithe's last government and true of Albert Reynolds and Bertie Ahern and Brian Cowan.
It feels malicious sometimes, especially when you're really enjoying it.
Another dimension to political coverage and election coverage during that period was the work of Dermot Morgan.
But I think it's more mischief, you know. I think it's kind of pointing out, what you're actually saying is that your local TD has got feet of clay. Like they keep putting their foot in it, we're all in the mud. But I think that's what, when I start to take off a politician, I'm probably working from, let's say, the language they use and from the way they talk, rather than saying, oh, well, now, I think I'll do a political satire on him, you know. I think that maybe that's another reason why political satire features so largely in the general body of satire, let's say, that's performed or written in this country. That's because politicians do have so much media exposure. They all have they tend to have a certain standard TD accent, you know, which is, I'm not prepared to say at the moment, things are happening, that's a question I don't want to go into. Isn't it true you're guilty of mass murder? We found bodies in the back garden, there are bodies in your kitchen, there are skeletons in your cupboard, we have documented. No, I wouldn't accept that at all. I've always acted in the interests of my constituents. And this is this kind of general blandness. It's when you see an inflated ego, I think that's what's so much fun, is to start deflating a large ego. And naturally, the name of the game for a statesman or a politician is that they must have a sense of authority, they must have power.
What I miss most about power is the reins I held and the greenness of the people and the free stationery with Taoiseach's office and a harp on it. And the long evening meetings of the parliamentary party and friends coming in to vote against me, and the free stationery with Taoiseach's office and a harp on it. And Sheila de Valera, the way she might look at you. My grandfather was a very great man. And the free stationery with Taoiseach's office and a harp on it. The money is good, and the Mercedes are free. You could fry an egghead if I still had Martin O'Donoghue. And you could certainly sink Desi O'Malley or George Colley with my free stationery with Taoiseach's office and a harp on it. If I only had my free stationery with Taoiseach's office and a harp on it.
So voting is on Saturday next. Counting is on Sunday with all-day radio and television coverage on RTE, and beginning with an exit poll. So no archive programme on Sunday morning next, but the earliest indications of the central question in any election: who governs next? This morning's programme was based on original programmes by Sean O'Rourke, John Ross, R.J. Dowling, Kevin Healy, Dermot Morgan and myself. More voices in the archives then in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for listening this morning, and good morning.